Well, hello and welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com. Well, first and foremost, we're a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself, loved one, maybe you're actively in recovery a little while or a long time, you're going to find all kinds of information, topics related to addiction, recovery, mental health, codependency, living a happy, successful, sober life at Recovery Today. My name is Rob Hanley. I'm the editor-in-chief of Recovery Today. And I'm joined by a guest that's maybe the most inspirational tragedy to triumph type of story that I have ever heard. Please meet my new friend, Erika Sandor-Zur. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Hello. Let me tell everybody about you. And I'm going to give you the quick story. We're going to kind of get into this as well, or we're going to get into it a lot. But here's the short story. Erika went from good home, good family, all the stuff like that, from being homeless later on, guess how, drugs, homeless and on the streets, not for a few days, but for a long time, in and out of 19 rehabs. In the process, had a couple of children, beautiful kids, I will say, lost them, of course, now to regaining full custody, which in itself is actually sobriety, which in itself is a phenomenal thing. But about 6 months ago, she made it to the pro tennis tour at the spry age of 41. Now, that's amazing, competing against 17 and 18-year-olds. So, Erika, thanks for jumping on. Everybody needs to hear this story. And it just sounds like science fiction to me, but thanks for jumping on.
My life.
Yeah, like your life. That's really, like, I had to really ask you last night, are you bullshitting me? Because,
right.
Like, don't bullshit me, please. You know, I look kind of dumb here, but, you know, you want proof, you want documentation. So, all right, so I'm going to just spotlight it again. I'm going to set it up because I like to highlight and circle and go, no way, etc. here. But, so, good home, good family, good background, later homeless, and I will tell everybody, by the way, I'm going to warn you, if you're watching the video before you're reading the article, because I'm including her whole story in here, it made me want to cry. As a dad of a little girl, it made me want to cry. So it was pretty raw, very raw, I will say, but then fast forward to, and they lived happily ever after, it blew me away also. So, like, let's just lay it out there. Like, let's start talking about this because I still find it hard to believe.
Sure. So, you know, I like to start off with this. You know, the disease does not discriminate. I had a wonderful childhood, you know, and, you know, and I say this, you know, feelings are feelings no matter how you feel them. Sad is sad, happy is happy, glad is glad. So, no matter how traumatic my story is to somebody who's like, oh, well, I can't relate to that, you know, try to find a way to see that feelings are feelings no matter how you feel them. So, you know, the way that I was raised, my dad's from Hungary, my mom's from Romania. You know, they're from a communist country. They came to America when they were both 16 years old and met here in Cleveland, Ohio. So, my upbringing was a lot different. You know, my mother has a sip of non-alcoholic white Zinfandel, and she's like, ooh, I think I feel it. I'm like, Mommy, there's no alcohol in it. She's like, no, there has to be, you know. And so I don't know where I came from because there is no, from what I know of, no alcohol or drug addiction in my family.
Wow.
So I had a great childhood, you know, and I played tennis growing up, so that was my life. I went to a co-ed private school. And I was 17 or 18 years old, and I worked at a coffee house right down the street from where I lived. And there was this little old man. He's like, oh, I'm having a birthday party, you know, across the street. Do you want to come on over? And I'm like, sure, you know, why not? And I had heard of heroin and cocaine and marijuana and alcohol, and I had never heard of crack. And why
Crack.
Yeah, crack. And so I go to this party. I mean, there were like 5 people there, and there are these white rocks everywhere. Excuse me. And I'm like, what's that? They're like, you want to try it? And I'm like, sure. And they put this $30 hit for my first thing that I ever put in my body. And I took a hit of it, and the second I ingested that, the second I inhaled, I was addicted. I knew there was a problem. And, and it's unbelievable because within 2 weeks, I was already in the hood as this innocent white girl, not having a clue, and I had a Mitsubishi Eclipse at the time, and I had sold it for a $20 hit of crack. And
what?
I had a $700 Nikon camera, and I sold it for $30. And I had not a clue, so I really had to learn the hard way very, very quickly, which I share in one of those articles that I had sent to you. Which I could talk about that too. But I went in and out. Somehow I managed to make it through. I'm like a walking oxymoron. I made it through Ohio State. And it's interesting because...
So stop real quick, because even that is amazing. The fact, first of all, I got to just pause because just going to like Ohio State University, just getting in today, but
right.
Even back then, like you went to Ohio, just to go to Ohio State, that's like, it's not like the JC college, that's pretty big, but you...
So the way the way that happened was, because I was ranked 8th in the nation, and I was ranked number 1 in northeastern Ohio from ages somewhere like around 12 and under.
Okay, I gotta stop because it's for you it's really normal maybe, or it's like it's part of your story, but like just to say I was ranked 8th in the nation, so you were the 8th best tennis player of age group what?
18 and under.
18 and under. Of all the kids playing tennis, like, I don't know, 100, 200, 500,000 that play tennis, a lot, you were the 8th.
You also have to remember, though, I was very, I wasn't into drugs or anything yet. So
right. No, I got it. But even still, the fact you were the 8th best tennis player of all for 1 year, 2 years, how many years?
I was number 1 since I was little, growing up, so I'm not
Okay,
sure.
So you were a phenomenal tennis player from the time you were a little kid. You're ranked 8th. Now around 17 or 18, you're still playing tennis, but you kind of like crack.
Yeah. Well, I stopped. Yeah. So, I had a full ride to Indiana University.
Wow.
And because of the beginning stages of my crack addiction, there was no way that I was able to go anywhere. So the reason why I ended up at Ohio State is I took the first semester or trimester, I'm not sure anymore which it was, semester or trimester. But I went to my first couple rehabs already at that age. And then when I came home from that, I met this boy, and, I fell in love. And he was going to Ohio State, so can you imagine my poor parents? I didn't do the scholarship at Indiana, and I walked on at Ohio State.
Wow.
So
that had to give them a little bit of a heart. They're thinking, oh, my God, like, all her college is paid for.
Yeah.
And then, like, what do you mean they're not going there?
Right. So it's interesting because I think about my college years, and, people ask me now, oh, you went to Ohio State. Who was your coach?
Yeah.
And I'm really embarrassed saying this, but I was so self-absorbed growing up and such a prima donna. I never listened to people. I was never able to be in the moment, and this is in hindsight looking back now why I was the way that I was, and I can't even remember my coach's name because I was so messed up in the head. This wasn't just and I wasn't smoking crack at the time that I was in college, but I did all other drugs. I dabbled in whenever, until eventually my senior year, I tried cocaine for the first time. So it's funny because it all goes backwards because crack was the first thing I ever tried. And when I had tried the cocaine, that was what brought me back to crack.
You didn't even have an alcohol problem like that or anything like that at all?
Not yet. Not yet. So, not yet, because that was actually alcohol was the last thing that I had put in my body in this last round. Because I put together, 3 years, 3.5 years, 1 year, 4.5 years, but I don't call it mental sobriety. I feel like there's so many differences with this round of sobriety right now. The main thing is that I got honest with myself, like really honest, and with everybody around me. But all the other times that I was sober, the seed had been planted But I was so mentally unhealthy, I would use any other addiction or any other ism, whatever I could do to not feel anything. If I felt uncomfortable, then I stomped on you or anybody else to make sure that I was okay. And not on purpose, but that was just, those are my coping skills,
Yeah.
So whether it was a sex addiction or gambling addiction or shopping addiction or, an eating disorder or whatever it was. So that's why I say that it wasn't a healthy sobriety, or whether it was screaming or, punching walls or whatever it was to get out of me.
So take us from, part of for your story, you're killer tennis player as a kid, prodigy, the whole nine, full ride, meet the boy at Indiana, tell the parents I'm leaving Indiana, I'm going to Ohio State. They're thinking, oh my God, how are we going to pay for college or whatever they're thinking. And then you actually walk on, so your college is free, right? Is that right?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's just my story.
Wow. So you're okay. You're at Ohio State, and then take it from there.
So I'm at Ohio State, and I never graduated Ohio State. I was there for 5 years. I'm a semester, or again a trimester. I'm not sure what they called it, short of graduating, and because it was the last year where I was supposed to graduate, where I tried the cocaine, which took me down. So I had to come home. And then I pulled it together. When I came home, it was interesting because, I own my own company now that I've owned for 19 years, and that started when I came home from college. It's interesting because I was working out at a gym, and, this man, sorry if you hear the noise in the background.
Good.
I think that I was working out, and this doctor comes up, and he's spotting me, and he says, hey, I'm starting, this business in one of the cities close to where I live, and it's a chiropractic business. And I'm like, chiro what? Me? I had not a clue. And he's like, yeah, I need a CA, which is a chiropractic assistant. Could you help me build this company? And I'm like, all right, sure. So, we literally started from scratch. We put the furniture, we put the adjusting tables in, and he ended up investing a tremendous amount of money in me and training me across the country. I was doing the billing, I was doing the marketing, I was doing the x-ray, and I didn't have, kids.
And you're a crack addict at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'm recovering at the time, so I feel like I replaced one addiction with another.
Okay.
So I wasn't smoking crack, but all I did was work.
Right.
And but I really learned how to build a company, and within a year and a half we were seeing like 120. I think the most we saw was like 127 patients in one day. But that was back then when insurance was good, and you could put a credit card and you could do $3,500 on a credit card for a year, and it didn't matter. And anyway, and so with that company, I was back it up though. It was interesting because there were so many facets to this. It was the first time that I had my own apartment because I had my own money, and I went to an actual furniture store and bought furniture and put it in my apartment, and I bought my first car, and then I had 3.5 years of sobriety at that point while I was building all of this. And in that time, I started my own company. I left that chiropractor because you can't plant a seed and pull the blinds down and not expect it to grow. Because I'm making this doctor all this money, and I'm, making minimum wage, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So, and I had built my name in the chiropractic community around the United States. So chiropractors were asking me to come build their clinic, for a week, and so they put me up in a hotel, and they would pay me to spend a week out there and promote their facility. And so it got to a point where I'm like, wow, I can start my own company. And so back then it was named Motivate Me, and I had 8 doctors at a time that I was working. I loved it, though. I loved it. But, the reason why I tell this, because I think it's important that I always use men as my God. And I learned this, now, because when I would be in a relationship I love everybody. I have like this, I don't ever want anybody to hurt as badly as I've ever hurt from what I learned on the streets, because it's tough out there. And so I was in a relationship, and he was like it was like a big boy, big girl relationship, you know. And he had his own place, and he had his own car, and he had his own job, and you know, it was like I was grown up. But you know, I wouldn't have liked me either at that time, when I think back of how I behaved and how flighty I was. And, you know, we broke up. And the day that we broke up, it's like the 3.5 years didn't even matter. I went right out to the streets. You know,
so real quick, so in terms of the addiction part of it, kind of what I got is all the great tennis pro, all the stuff, you know, tennis, amateur, Ohio State, Blur, then you're in a couple of rehabs at the same time, and now you're sober for a few years. You're not smoking crack anymore, but instead it's like maybe like a work addiction. You put it in there, chiropractic type of stuff. Boyfriend now, sex addiction, love addiction. Then he breaks up, right? And that's because I was thinking, like, how did you become homeless? So it sounds like that's what's next.
So, well, not yet. There's many facets to this. So the homelessness started I have like different chapters of my using, and I'm sure a lot of people do who are addicts or in recovery or whatnot.
Yep.
You know, so the homelessness started on my California run. So when I had relapsed in Cleveland, you know, I never was able to actually smoke crack in my own apartment. So that was a whole other using stage where I learned that kind of paranoia, where I was in my own home now, you know, and I had my own issues I had to deal with until I ran out of money and ended up on the streets there. But that's when I went to CAT. So that was a whole other stretch in Cleveland, you know, and at the end of that run, you know, I was Cleveland, you know, it's like it's snowing right now, and in the winter it's terrible. You know, where I would be hiding in the dumpsters, you know, trying to smoke crack because I was too afraid to go back to my apartment, and it's snowing on top of me, and I don't, you know, have the proper clothes on. And it got so bad at that point, you know, and I got caught. So it's not that I stopped because, I mean, I always knew I had a problem. I was never in denial, ever. And I always wanted help. I couldn't stop when I started. And so when I got caught, you know, I was sent to California, and my parents weren't going to pay for treatment. And so I was like, well, I'm Erika, you know, and I can do anything. So I walked into Betty Ford, and I ended up getting a scholarship there at the outpatient program. My family lives in California, also my mom's sister. So I stayed with my cousin.
Oh, so that's like you're telling your parents, I'm leaving Cleveland, I'm out of here, I'm going to go stay with my aunt or whatever in California or something like that.
Exactly. And when I went there, I really wanted help. I was able to make it on that flight, and I was able to somehow make it to their house. So that couple of days of whatever, it's not really clarity, but I'm not.
And how old about are you then? Like, are you 22 or something like that?
No. I think that I was like 26 at that time, because I got out of college, I had that 3.5 years at home. So,
did you graduate at Ohio State? Did you graduate college? No, okay.
No, I never graduated. Yeah, I'm a trimester shy of graduating. So, but I never, you know, I owned my own company throughout all of this. I never lost the name of it. So I was like, you know. So, you know, I made it through in California. I've been married 3 times, so I've met my first husband out there. And it was interesting because here goes another addiction with a man. You know, he was here and I was here. And I thought that, you know, he lived with his parents and he didn't have a job, and that looked really good to me. And so I wasn't healthy. I didn't have it here, you know. And I was really living the street life in Cleveland, so I was brain dead when I came to California, you know. And so I started to get healthy, and I went to treatment, and I'm getting healthier, and I'm getting healthier. We get married. And then I stay on the path, and I'm like this. And he was such a sweetheart. We didn't have an unhealthy relationship. We were just young. And he was good being here, and I'm like, I'm here now. I'm like, come with me. He's like, no, I'm good. You know, And that didn't work for me. And so one day we looked at each other and I said, hey, do you think we're going to be happy spending the rest of our lives together? And he said no. He asked me, I said no. And we held hands walking into the courthouse, and then we've never spoken again.
Wow.
But the problem with that was, again, using a man as my God, I went out and I found drugs in California. I was living in Palm Springs. I think I lived there for about 7 years. One of those years was in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is what took me down. So within that stretch, though, using in California was a whole other world. And it was scary for me. I had never lived that kind of drug life. I was living on the streets. I was a hustler, and I had hustled people, and I preyed on weak women. And I was in a, I don't think I've ever shared this story, actually. Okay, so I was in a therapy group, women's group, and we went on a cruise in Palm Springs, and there was a lady there, an older lady, and I realized soon as I was talking with her that I could use her and I can get money from her. And I got the money and I used that money, and I went to Los Angeles. I moved into the penthouse. This is with no job, no money, but this is just me using my street smarts and the hustle, which is not something I'm proud of. My dad always said, to me that if you were able to use your street smarts in real life, how successful I could be, which, at the end of this whole story is what I'm doing now. And she gave a lot of money. She wrote a check to me, and I would go because I was using when I lived in Los Angeles, and I was living in the penthouse, so I would go door to door on the top floor, and I would knock and be like, hey, I live right there, I left my wallet, in the car, which is on its way to Palm Springs, and because I lived and they saw where I lived and they knew it, so why would they think that I'm smoking crack? And so I was slowly learning this hustle, but I lost that very, very quickly. There's a lot to that story where this is, I found my spirituality in Los Angeles, in that penthouse. It was very, very scary because I had about $1,000 crack habit a day. And I remember pulling the blinds down, and calling my family and just saying, bye-bye, I'm gone. I for sure thought that I was going to die. Hi. And if I walked out the elevator, I'd be like, I'm fucked up. Just call me fucked up, because I couldn't hide it anymore. And the places where it took me, because now I had a whole new way of smoking crack, and it was in this penthouse, that I didn't care about because I didn't work for that money. I didn't work for that, so I used it as a stomping ground to bring crazy people in and just wreak havoc of it. And I brought the streets to my palace, and the streets took my palace away from me, it's interesting because I tell this story because this is a huge part of it, the spirituality, and God is my higher power, for anybody, who doesn't believe in it, you hear it time and time again, whatever you can grab onto, something that's bigger than you. For me, it was God. And so I was dancing, and I had my headphones on, and I was dancing and was listening to techno music in my apartment, and I suddenly hear Palm Springs, got to go to Palm Springs, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not on this. And at that time, it was a CD player that I was listening to.
Right.
And with my headphones on, hoping you won't skip while I'm walking around with it. And so I was also an artist for a very short time, and I had this piece of art on the wall, and they said, do you want to see your grandfather? He had passed away a year before that. He's here. And I'm like, wait a second, I know I'm high, but something's going on. And I look at the painting and I see his face, and then it says, you want to see your grandmother? They're together and they're happy. And then I hear this weird sound say, this is your soul, raise up your hands, because you've already lost. And then I hear my grandparents get on and say, the reason why we're here tonight, and this is on my headphones, the reason why we're here tonight is because at 10 o'clock tonight you're supposed to overdose and die. And yeah, right.
Wow.
you know, and that didn't even stop me, you know. And so that's a whole other story, but
Yeah.
I ended up going back to Palm Springs, and that sense, because I was homeless in Cleveland also, and I was homeless in Florida, but this sense of being homeless in California.
You've been homeless all over.
Yeah. So I you know, I love drugs, and I don't know how to stop when I put it in me, you know, and I don't. So the way that I started, I really want to reiterate this though. The way that I started my relapse, I had a boyfriend also at that time, and I had that 3.5 years, and he had relapsed. Crack was his drug of choice, and and I thought to myself, hey, you know, I can take a hit, take some Seroquel, wake up in the morning, and everything will be okay, you know, and I can go down and I can save him, and we can come out together and live happily ever after. I was delusional, and that was me being sober, and that I thought was in my right mind. So I didn't understand the disease, and I didn't understand my disease. And so I took that hit of crack, and because of one, a year later, I was smoking crack with cockroaches in an abandoned apartment building, sticking needles in my arm in Florida because of the one hit, just one. I had the idea that I got this down, I'm going to take that Seroquel, you know. So being homeless, I still had the car. I managed to keep certain things until I lost that too. And I drove from California to Florida. Now, in the midst of that, I was in a very abusive, now I was in the drugs, you know. And some of my stories that I talk about, you know, California was really, really tough. There was, you know, we had a crew. We called it the Six Musketeers, and I was in a lot of trouble. Like, we did horrible, unimaginable things, and, you know, I had a drug dealer. It is, at one point when I was arrested, you know, they wanted me to become a rat, and we had a signal with the dealer that if that was ever going to happen, what we would say so that they would know, you know, because I wasn't going to tell, you know, because I wanted to get high more.
You get killed for that. You get killed for
True.
that.
But word got out that I was a rat, and
you didn't signal? You didn't do the signal?
They didn't believe me.
Oh.
They didn't believe me. So they picked me up in a car, and they put me in the middle of the hood, and they dropped me there, and they took care of me. I don't know how I'm alive. So I was in a relationship where, you know, it's crazy because in California, I found a job there. It was called Mathis Brothers, and it's the largest furniture store in the country. And I was working there, and one of the guys who I was friends with, I think he had at that time like 21 years of sobriety, and crack was his drug of choice. And we became, you know, like best friends, and he was trying to help me, and I'll never forget it. We were in the car one day, and he was like, listen, either you're going to go out in the street and you're going to get killed, you're getting sloppy, or I'm going to help you. You know, so I might as well put you up in a hotel and pay for it so that you don't get beaten on the streets, you know, at least this way, because I know you're going to get high anyway, so let me help you. And one day we were in the car, and I remember blowing the smoke in his face, and I watched it change. And that night, he went back out.
Oh, man. 21 years?
21 years. So he ended up becoming my boyfriend. So he would rate me every day.
Oh, come on.
I use that word because for me, you know, part of my story when I was, you know, 17 or 18, you know, I talk about it in that story about how, you know, 4 guys had taken care of me and I, you know, turned me over on my stomach and raised me from behind, and then threw that $5 piece of crack at me, you know, and I talk about how I smoked that crack and I had to walk in the snow with blood going down my leg, you know, with no shoes on. So this is, you know, there's no excuse for it, but it's also part of the game. And I didn't have a voice because I was so enmeshed in my own addiction. You know, so this relationship, I was already used to being thrown around by men, you know, and I didn't have a voice because I needed to get high, and I had no other way at that time to do it. So, but this was tough. He physically abused me, you know, and the way that I was able to get away from him is I left California. And I drove from
Should have
California.
killed and buried him out in the desert.
Right.
Well, I'm just saying.
Well, I drove from California to Florida with not a dime in my pocket. I slept better, ate better, and smoked more crack than I ever smoked because of humanity. So, you know, I would drive, and I drove with somebody, and it took us about a week. Well, that's not true. Let me back that up. So we would. Don't you know that in every state, whenever there's a Martin Luther King drive, there's the hood? So we stopped at every Martin Luther King, and that's how we were able to hustle and get the drugs. But, you know, we would stop, like, at a gas station, and I would say to people, you know, I don't want your money. If I told you my story, you wouldn't believe me anyway. You know, I don't want your money. Could you put some gas in the car? I'm trying to get to this location. You know, whatever I would say. And if I was hungry, I'd go into a Burger King, and I'd say, listen, I don't want your money, but I'm starving. And I meant it. I was really hungry. And people would feed me, you know, and
of course.
It was unbelievable. And then they would give the money too, you know, but they knew I wasn't healthy.
I've actually done that exact thing. I had a guy.
I don't stop doing that now because of what they did for me, because these people, humanity saved my life.
I can think about not long ago, old guy walked up to me, can you put gas? My wife and I are stranded. I ended up giving him gas. I ended up going in the Quick Mart, buying him sandwiches, Coke, waters. Then I think I gave him $20 and told the other driver, give this guy some money. So, yeah.
Humanity. We have empathy, you know? And so, you know, Florida, I made it to Florida. Florida was tough because the whole time I spent in Florida, I didn't have a home at all. Like, I didn't have anywhere to stay. I didn't have anywhere to lay my head. I was living in the bushes. They have beautiful bushes.
You're living in the bushes in Florida, okay?
In bushes, because it was a hideaway. I could smoke crack and I could hide and I wouldn't be seen, you know. But then I would see beautiful things after I would take a hit, and I was okay in my head.
So how long in total, like, were you homeless? And then I've only got like a couple of rehabs in here too. You got 2-3 rehabs. Like, how long?
Between all of this too, I'm just so Florida. So the rehab stunt started after Florida. So because that's not true. In California, I went to one other rehab. That was after somewhere in between that time. And I've been to so many different
Blur, yeah.
When I got back to Cleveland. So, you know, I went to the Betty Ford, got sober for 3.5 years, went to this other high-end rehab. It was a house. There was like 4 people in the house. But when I got out, you know, I was still using. I wasn't done. So Florida is when the rehab stunt started. My family had cut me off. You know, they weren't talking to me. But I would call my mom still. She would just pick up, but she wouldn't talk to me. And one day I called her, and I said to her, you know, if you don't come and get me, I'm going to die. The next time you see me is going to be in my coffin. So she came and she got me, my poor, innocent European mother.
She comes out from Cleveland to California?
Yeah, and you know, and you know those stories. I OD'd right in front of her. Like, the stories are surreal. But we eventually were able to fly back. The airport wouldn't let me on the plane because I was so out of control. You know, because I was not 1 second without putting a drug in me. You know, and there came a point where, like, you know, I would hotel hop. I'm hopping a little bit back and forth from, like, California to Florida because those are very important parts of this homelessness and the street life that I lived. And I was hotel hopping, you know, and room hopping with different men and women. It didn't matter. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and looking at my body sexually. And I was just like, I had to find another way. Like, I can't do this anymore to my body. I didn't recognize myself. And that's when I found this other hustle, and that was using, preying on people, you know. But not in, I was never like a mean person. I always had, like, I was that drug addict that, you know, when I had, like, a hotel room, I would find one of those girls on the streets and be like, hey, listen, there's another way that you could try smoking crack. Come with me. And I would pay for them. Because I knew how much it hurt, and I knew what that other female or male was doing to get the drugs because I was doing it. And now I had a one night of relief where I didn't have to go and, you know, suck some guy's dick or do something to a female or whatever it was. I had a moment, I had a couple of hours where I could just chill. And I wanted to bring people with me in on that because this disease is very scary and very, very painful and very, very real. Yeah, I talk about it in one of my stories. You know, I used to, I'm saying this like for the kids, I used to suck so much dick that my lip was so swollen I couldn't even put a crack pipe in my mouth. You know what I mean? And I share this openly because it's real. This is where the disease took me. So, you know, my mother, back to my mom in Florida, so she comes and she gets me, and eventually I end up going to, it's called Karen Rehab. So, you know, that was my 15th rehab. So in between, I was going to all these other smaller rehabs or whatever, you know, but then, and they all planted the seed for me, and I would graduate from them, and I was like, yeah, I got this, but I didn't have the right tools when I got out. You know, and that was, I was never honest with myself, ever. You know what I mean? And that's why I always went back out. And I would latch on to a man or to something, you know, and as soon as I would get hurt, it was a great excuse to go and get high because I didn't know any other way, you know, and I never tackled those issues. I never worked the steps. I wasn't going to AA. You know, I tried AA, and I did that for, you know, when I was in Cleveland, whatever. It's so enmeshed with everything. And so I went to Karen Rehab, and I was really serious this time. You know, like, I'm really going to do this. And that's when I met my ex-husband, my second. And it's kind of like if I'd go into a rehab now, pick the sickest guy and be like, hey, baby, you're hot and sexy. Let's have a baby and get married. So we ran out of rehab together, and we hustled our way to some hotel, and he left me and went to Florida, and that's a whole other spiritual story too, which there's so much of this, like real
stuff. Yeah, I
can
tell. I mean,
yeah.
You know, wow.
It's truly, God's always been with me, and spirits have always been with me because I should be dead. And that's how I know that I'm supposed to do something big to give back to people because, so we end up in Florida together through another magical story, how I got to the airport and how I got on an airplane with no ID, no anything at that time is beyond me. I say it's God. And I remember, you know, I had probably like, I don't know, maybe a week of not using. I was in my cutoff and this little tank top, and I didn't look healthy. And we go to this precious metal place, and I walk up to the owner, and I'm like, listen, you know, I got like a week sober. I don't have a place to live. I don't have a job. I don't have anything, but I really want to work. I'll do whatever it takes. And this guy hires us, and he puts us up in his office in the back. There was a couch there. And imagine there's these TVs and there's these computers and all this electronic stuff. This guy is trusting this crackhead, you know, with all of this stuff not to boost it. And we made it work. In the morning, he said, you just need to get up and you need to get ready in the bathroom. And him and his fiancée at that time, she gave me her clothes and he gave my ex-husband.
They're probably in recovery themselves or something, you know.
Who knows? Humanity. So we would get ready in the bathroom and shower under the sink, and, you know, then we got our first paycheck, and that was it. Apparently, Florida, if they don't want you, they will pay for you to get out of their states. And so, you know, it's interesting throughout this whole time, I'm Jewish, and I kept in touch with my rabbi. And so I had called her, and I said, listen, like, I've never been this, like, every time I was like, I've never been this bad. It was a different kind of bad. It was a different experience. You know, I hear people say, did you hit your rock bottom? I had many different rock bottoms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't, so for me, that saying doesn't fit. But that's just for me. And so she said, okay, we're going to put you up in a hotel here in Cleveland, Ohio. Come back home. Florida paid for the Greyhound tickets, And I remember looking at my ex at that time and saying to him, how am I going to stop? I want to stop. I don't know how to. I can't. And he said, you're just going to have to pray to God and really mean it. I'm like, I am. He goes, no, really. So we had our crack pipes in our hand, and we had our needles, and we held each other's hands, and we looked at each other, and we threw it. And that was on 6/27. I think it was
June 27th. What year?
I think that was of 09. I believe it was 09. And I stayed sober from then on for 4.5 years from that very moment. I could feel my heart racing because it was such a big deal for me. We detoxed on that Greyhound for a week, and it was painful. And we get into the hotel here, and I was brain dead. I tried getting like a serving job, and I couldn't, an easy serving job, and I couldn't read off the menu how to remember anything. I mean, I spoke like, I don't know. I didn't speak. I couldn't talk, and I was brain dead. And we lived in that hotel for a long time. But I wasn't using, and I got really into the program, and in December of 09, we got pregnant. Yeah, so it was of 09. December of 09, we got pregnant, and so I was 7 months sober before Eric was conceived. And it was a healthy pregnancy chemically wise, but our relationship was extremely mentally abusive. I mean, neither one of us had coping skills, so how could it be healthy?
So let me fast forward a little bit, because the thing that I keep thinking in my mind, and maybe the audience too, is, and there's so much I want to say, but like, how did you get to where you are now? Like, I don't want to say, let's fast
I'll fast forward all of it. Totally.
So many things, but like,
yeah.
How?
Sure. So the way that I got to where I am now is this last round when I had relapsed, I didn't want to die, but I didn't want to get high anymore, and I wanted to stop, and I couldn't, and what do you do? And I was so beaten down, and I was mentally so exhausted, and I was still enmeshed in my ex-husband's relationship, and we had another child in the midst of, because we were legally married for 8 years, but we legally got separated after 6 months of marriage. But I was always enmeshed in that abuse. And I was done. I was ready to get out of it, and I didn't know how to. And I remember sitting across the chair from my attorney, and he made comments to me like, have you ever been arrested? And I'm like, which state? And we would laugh about that, but then he looked at me in all seriousness, and he's like, I can't help you if you don't get honest. And I don't know why I heard him in that moment. I heard him, and I was like, I was trying to think what that honesty would look like, and that was really scary. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, because you're a con artist, and you're a complete full-on addict. You know how to manipulate. You know how to do all of these things.
But I decided to, and it wasn't pretty. And I remember walking into that courthouse and looking at it, because I was on probation in 4 different counties, and I went to each one of those judges, and I told the truth. I said, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, and it was scary telling the truth, because the things that I did, they weren't pretty, and the people that I was hurting along the way. And it was amazing, because the second that I got honest, and the second that I genuinely asked for help and saying, I can't do this, I don't know how I'm going to stop, I really need help, you know what I mean? And everybody helps me. And I developed this circle. And, I remember when to get to where
with honesty is the cornerstone. With honesty is the cornerstone.
I'm telling you, and when I met my husband now, this is how this all started, me, where I am now, really, when I met him. It was at yoga. I was trying to get healthy, and yoga was part of another sobriety stint, so I was like, well, if I go back there, maybe this will work. And I was going to hustle my husband at the time because I thought I could get money off of him, and he asked me out that night. We went out, and I'd never met anybody that had talked more than me, and it was him. And I had been on the streets.
I seldom meet people that talk more than me, but go ahead.
Right. And I had been on the streets for so long now, so then when he spoke to me, it was so intelligent. And I was very attracted to that because I hadn't heard somebody normal in so long. And I remember, a couple of weeks later, we weren't dating or anything, but I was at a crack house, and I called him from the crack house, and I said, listen, you don't know me, at all, and if you never speak to me again, that's okay, but if you don't come and get me, I'm going to die here. And he took me back he came and he picked me up. He took me back to his house, and we call it Jordan Rehab. So, and I would watch him prepare the coffee machine at night, and I would watch him clean the dishwasher, and I would watch him, make his bed and sleep. And he had shampoo and conditioner and soap and face cream, little things, and he would fold laundry, and he would watch TV, and he would cook. And I was I was very confused, and I wanted that. And I thought to myself, with or without him, this is what I want. And the first year that we were together, he traveled a lot for work. He's a production manager and sound engineer for rock stars. So now I'm his rock star, so he can handle me. And so he traveled a lot. So I navigated through a lot during that first year. And I remember when I drew the line in the sand. So, 7/11 of 2017 is my sobriety date. The truth was just, I took that leap of faith. I remember asking God the same way I asked him when I threw the crack pipe and the needles. And I remember saying to him, I pray for the will to want the will to, ... Cause
I prayed for the will to want the will to.
Right, because I didn't have the will. I was praying for the will to want this.
Yep.
And I knew that it couldn't have gotten any worse than it is right at that moment. And I was like, what do I have to lose? Because my thinking is not working. So I threw my hands up in the air. I took that blast. For me, I wanted that magical blast and finish it and everything. And it was another spiritual story. And it happened. And I've been sober ever since. The thing is, though, the way that I was able to gain custody back of my children, and it was not easy. I was able, now that I was ready to be honest, I was able to go to the courthouse and say, hey, listen, you could take a hair test from me, but that meant that they had to take a hair test from my ex, because I had lost the kids at this point, and they were with my ex, and I knew that he was in his active addiction. Because I wasn't sucking all the oxygen out of every room that I was in at this point, and so his test came up positive now, and thank God my parents were there, and they were able to take the kids for a year. And so every week I was taking drug tests, and I had to take my clothes off, and they would look inside of me, and they were doing regular hair testing. So you can get hair testing where they cut your hair, and they do the nail testing and the toenail testing. And
you can't fake it.
Yeah. So I was doing that every single week and checking in, monthly with all of my probation officers. And I remember when I had, sorry, my dog. I remember when the first time after a year I hadn't seen my children, and I got to see them at a Panera, for an hour with the supervisor. And slowly but surely I started building that up until they were allowed at my house. And even when the kids were with my parents, we followed the rules. I wasn't allowed to Skype with them. I wasn't allowed to talk with them. But I was willing at this point now to do whatever it took. I had a guardian ad litem and the whole story. The day that Jordan and I got married, the kids were only allowed to be with me for a couple hours. I didn't have my kids yet. So the day that I got full custody back of my kids, it was like Jordan and I, my husband, it was like going to the hospital pregnant with twins and, coming home with twins. And it's the same thing. It was like going to the courthouse with twins and coming home, because I hadn't been a mom for so long now. It had been like 2.5 years that I was just on the streets on my own.
So
yeah.
How did the tennis pick back up? Take me to how did that pick up?
So the tennis picked up. So let me show it to you. So I made this vision board. My dog ate half of it right there. So I made this vision board, and I put my company name on there. And I didn't have my kids back yet, so I put my kids. And I put tennis, that I wanted to start playing tennis again, and I wanted my family, and I wanted to travel. And I wrote, positive affirmations, and that I want to start playing tennis again. And the next day after I made this vision board, I ran into my old tennis coach, who I hadn't seen in 15 years at a Starbucks that he never goes to. And I thought to myself, you know, how cool would it be, you know, to start playing tennis again, get to a Grand Slam, let the world know. At that time I was 40, that you could be 40 and recovery and have a do-over in life. And so, you know, now I went to Florida, and I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but his name is Nick Bollettieri, and if, you know, he's the #1 coach in the world. You know, he has 10 Grand Slam winners, like, you know, Serena Williams and Andre Agassi, Monica Seles, and he heard my story and saw me play, and, you know, they wanted to see.
So when was this? When did this first start? When did the thing, you put the vision board, you put tennis, and then the next day?
So the vision board was 2 years ago on New Year's.
And have you been playing tennis as a crack addict over the last, be homeless tennis player, crack addict?
No, I was sober already because 7/11 of 2017 is my sobriety date. So.
But over this whole stretch from like Ohio State, because we haven't talked about tennis at all, over this whole stretch, it's not like you're homeless and playing tennis.
No, I didn't play tennis for 15 years. Nothing. I couldn't even look at tennis. I couldn't watch it on. I mean, I wouldn't have watched it on TV anyway.
Okay, so you finally get sober this last time. You put on a vision board, tennis, and get your kids back and all this stuff like that, which is more important, of course, than tennis. But it's very remarkable. And the next day, you meet your old tennis coach at Starbucks that he never goes to, and now he goes, well, come on, start playing tennis.
He was very apprehensive, actually. He wasn't quite like, yeah, come on, you know, like, it took him.
Well, you probably got, like, what, at that point you got a few months of sobriety, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get on the court, and I was just like, oh, my God, this is awesome. I felt this feeling inside of me, like.
And you must have been still pretty good, obviously.
My husband says I was. I don't feel that I was, but okay. So, I mean, I had the hand-eye coordination, you know, so I was able to pick. I'm an athlete anyway, so I was able to pick back up.
So your old tennis coach looks at you, you get on the court the first time, you got a few months of sobriety, your husband's like, yeah, damn, you're pretty good. And then the coach must have said, well, hey, why don't you, like, start getting back into it, and let's go to a tournament. I don't understand, like, the whole. Yeah, no,
yeah. My coach was extremely apprehensive. He was very worried that I was going to latch on to this and have this as a new addiction, and that if I don't succeed and I don't do well, then I'm going to go back out. So he talked to my dad, and he's like, listen, she's really running with this. We got to slow this down. Like, this isn't. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to go to IMG. I'm going to be seen, you know, because something felt different inside of me, and I was ready. I had my, you know, I was about to get my kids back. So it was a week before I got my kids back that I went to IMG and met this other coach in Florida.
What's IMG? What is IMG?
So IMG is one of, like, the biggest sports, how should I say this? Many stars come out from IMG, whether it's track or soccer or football or tennis.
Oh, they're like a sports agency, I think, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I went there, and they wanted to see if I was coachable and teachable. This story, they were like, this isn't all.
Why did they even see you, though? Why would they even see you? That's what I don't understand. Why would
Because the guy who I was on the tennis court with, the coach, I told him my story, and he's like, holy shit. And I was good enough at the court that he was like, I wonder, we might have something here. So he calls Nick Bollettieri up and pulls me in the office and puts me on the phone with him. And I'm like, oh, my God, you know, this is incredible. And they put me on the court with him, and, you know.
With this #1, what's his name, this tennis coach?
Nick Bollettieri.
So he's coached everybody.
You can see it on my Instagram, my picture, you know, with him talking with me, because now he's my coach right now.
So he's coached everybody, the best coach in the world, this guy.
Yeah. So I told him my story, and he's standing there, you know, watching me and having me hit with somebody, and he's like, okay. You know, he's like, let's see if this really, you know, this is a girl's dream. I don't want to take it away from her, you know. And they wanted me to, you know, move to Florida, which we couldn't do, you know, and they wanted to do all this stuff. And I'm like, well, you know, this is a 1 in a trillion opportunity, 1 in a trillion chance of anybody being able to actually do this. So, you know, everybody was cautiously optimistic with this. But then it got to a point when they saw that I wasn't giving up and I was getting better and I was improving, until one day they're like, holy shit, she's ready for a tournament. And
when was that? How long ago was that?
It was in Mexico about 6 months ago, in Cancun. And so you know, they called the director up out there, and his name's Alex Ortega, and told my story to him, and he's like, bring her on over, let's see what happens. It's crazy because the first time I stepped on the court and I heard my name from the judge, I'm like, I looked around and like, holy shit, like this crackhead is on the tennis court. And I'm bouncing my first ball after they say my name, and I'm like, you know, it was surreal to me because I was thinking about when I was thrown out of a car from another crack, you know, at 60 miles per hour, and I'm rolling on the streets, and now I'm on the tennis court playing this tournament. I got my ass kicked the first couple of times. I was so nervous. I didn't have a clue what was going on, but I had made it on the tour, and I'm like, oh my God, and slowly but surely, you know, I started winning some games off of people, and, you know, I played a tournament in California.
Okay, wait, stop real quick. Okay, let me just interrupt you real quick. So because this is so much, it's so much, okay? Even the tennis part is so much without all of the other part. Because I don't know tennis that much. I know Serena, and I know some stuff. I know little things here and there. But my first question, and I really want to bring this out, is like when you had told me, oh yeah, and I'm a pro tennis player, because you don't just say like, yeah, I'm a pro tennis player. Like there's bazillions of tennis players. There's not hardly any that are pro. So at first I was thinking like, oh, you're a pro like at a club,
right,
you know, which still would be remarkable. Or okay, I am a pro at 40-year-old females living in the Midwest. Right, but that's what I was thinking, like some small segment. But you're talking about like you're an actual professional tennis player, like the same as like Serena would be, although of course she's
much lower level. Yeah,
yes. But there's not millions of people in between you though either. You are like you're a professional tennis player now.
Yeah, it's funny. Last night we were laying in bed, my husband and I, and he was going through the ESPN on his phone, and he was going to the people that he follows on ESPN Sport, and he's like, "Oh fuck, let me just put my name on there," and my name popped up on ESPN as a pro tennis player.
Freaking crazy,
man. And I'll say this, like, you know, I feel like, holy shit, you can go on ESPN and put up my name, you know, and it'll come up as a pro tennis player to follow me.
We'll probably link it here somewhere.
Yeah, you know, and so I haven't, you know, the plan right now, I've been going through some injuries because I am 41. So I'm still on the tennis court training. The next tournament we're planning on doing is in March. I'm really excited because I feel like this injury has done wonders for me mentally because, you know, I'm still navigating how to be a mom, a wife, like how to have a job, responsibilities, how not to freak out when I feel anything at all, you know, and let alone, you know, train as much as I'm training. And so, again, you know, the next tournament is coming up. Hopefully in March, what we're planning on doing, and I feel like when this actually takes off, when I start really winning, this is going to be huge. And it's not just going to be huge because I'm 41 years old. It's going to be huge because of the recovery aspect, that you don't have to, just because life happens and horrible things can happen, it's never too late to live your dream. I had to be willing to be in pain. I had to be willing to be uncomfortable. I had to be willing to trust myself. Which, how do you trust yourself? How did I learn to trust myself after all the things that I did? And it all came down to just being honest.
Well, the main question that I have is probably the same. I mean, not knowing you at all, just from a couple phone conversations and then trading back and forth on Instagram. In fact, it's funny. As I was telling you yesterday. When I first saw you on Instagram, I thought you're, a sober mom, which is really, again, fantastic. You're like this crazy person working out with these jungle gyms, this home, working out at your house with these rubber bands and these little jungle gyms. And then I thought, damn, like she worked out these jungle gyms, all with the bouncy ball, the balls. So I'm like, what if she got a little jungle gym company or something like that? But then the tennis part, that really blew me away. So to get what my question is like, the same as the chiropractic, the same as this, like, don't you think about, like, hey, is this my addiction? Like, what happens if it doesn't? I don't want to be like that, but, like, what happens?
So The difference between what I'm doing right now as a passion and using this as my God is that I don't have holes to fill right now.
Okay.
I'm really doing the work. You know, I'm really doing the work. Like,
you're working your sobriety now. Do
I'm
you have
working
like
my
a sponsor?
sobriety,
What do you do?
and I'm stopping now. You know, like I take my days off. You know, I'm about to go on the court in about 20 minutes to train, which is really cool. But I do the same thing today that I did the first day that I decided to get sober. You know, I see my therapist. I have my support group.
Okay.
You know, so
your recovery is as legit as everything else.
It's so cool and so hard at the same time, truly. But what I'm learning, though, is when I am uncomfortable and when I feel like, what am I doing, I can stop today. And I talk about this. You know, my kids are fully enmeshed in the recovery because I had lost them. So in order for my 9-year-old to heal, I needed to tell him the truth. But with that truth came his acceptance, and he was able to recover. You know, and now, you know, if I'm having an off day or an off moment, I can tell my family and my husband and my kids, hey, listen, I'm navigating through these feelings. I'm not sure what the hell to do with them, so bear with me. If mommy's not all there, I'm working on this. You know, because now suddenly I'm a mom while I'm sober.
Where do things rank for you in terms of importance? I'm just curious to know more about you. So, like, I'm assuming, like, it's God, maybe. Don't let me fill in the blanks. But then is it God and family and sobriety, God, sobriety, family, sobriety?
So God and sobriety.
Tennis, and then tennis, obviously, in there, too, right?
Well, so this is how I know my rankings. So God and sobriety, to me, are the same.
Okay.
There's no...
Nothing happens without sobriety. Nothing happens without God.
That to me is the exact. It's like saying the same thing. The way that I knew that my family was before my tennis was because I had a tournament that I was going to play in Mexico, and I withdrew from it because Eric, was it Eric or Hayden? I don't know. I think it was. Oh no, it was Hayden. He had a recital, his first singing recital with his class. And there was no way in God's green earth that I was going to miss that recital. And I didn't go to the tournament.
Because you're so high energy. Like, I have to just say, like, I'm not a therapist or anything like that, but, like, it's like, bam, bam, bam. All these things are so big that it's, I mean, you're, like, it's you know, sometimes yoga-ish people are just kind of like, oh, yeah, you know, it's, you know, chill. But you're, like, you just seem like, and maybe that's part of how, what's so remarkable, like from crack addict, you know, homeless to like I'm a tennis with the top. It's just, you know, like it winds me up. It winds me up. Like, so I'm like, I don't know you, but I'm thinking like that was the main question for me. Like, what happens if? And again, I don't want to plant a seed of negativity because I love a Rocky story. I love a Rocky story. I love a hope story.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the tennis, absolutely. Tennis could not work, but I'm already a winner. I made it on the tour. I set out. Yeah. I'm past my dream right now. I made it on the tour. Now it's just...
It's freaking unbelievable.
Yeah, you know, and
it's unbelievable.
So I have other projects, you know, that I'm starting that I talked to you about, you know,
yeah.
And
we'll talk about those in different. We'll talk about those in different because you got to go out and play tennis, but.
Yeah. So and I have my company, you know, and I have my family, so I'm full.
So let me punctuate kind of where I left off the whole thing, and then we'll bring it in for a landing here. But you actually can play against. It's possible, and it's not like climb Mount Everest barefoot. You actually can play for the Grands. I don't know what the Super Bowl is. Is that the Grand Slam? I don't know what that is. You could play against Serena. Is that like realistic, or are you just going to play? I don't just because you're a pro tennis player, but like. How far can you live? I mean, realistically, how far can you actually take this?
To play Serena at a Grand Slam.
No shit. Like, is that really like? Is that like what your dream is? Your actual like your goal?
I have a manager. This drug addict has a manager today.
You have a manager.
I have a manager. Yeah.
And so this isn't like a delusion in your head. Your manager thinks that you could do that too.
They hope.
They hope.
Yeah.
They're like. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's either going to happen or it's not. I believe it will.
You're a pro tennis player. You went from crack addict to pro tennis player.
Yeah. It's a 1 in a trillion chance. but I've already done the 1 in a trillion because I'm sober, you know? And so, and I'm good. And what's even more important, that I'm playing against these younger, amazing, talented women, but I have something else.
How old are they? How old are they?
17, 18.
You're 41 and you're playing 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
You're playing you before college. Wow.
Yeah. And these girls, they don't go to school, you know, a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know, they train, and they're incredible. Oh, my God. You know, that's a whole other story.
And you got a husband, and you got kids, you've got sobriety, you've got trying to hold your shit together, be a wife, be normal.
It's cool. My family came to, the kids and my husband came to a tournament with me. And
what does your parents say? What does your parents say?
Oh, my God. They were totally against this in the beginning. And you know, my mother is still trying to navigate through this because she finally, my mother's main concern is that I'm not going to be there for the kids, you know, because I'm not. So, but the kids are fully involved with this. They come with me on a tennis court. They
play tennis too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but what a beautiful opportunity for them to see their mother be this hero. You know, went from what I was to now, and this is only going to be another 4 years. It's a 5-year plan. We're a half a year into it. You know, the plan is by the 4th year to get into the Grand Slam. You know, so they're going to be how old? They're not even going to be teenagers when I'm done with this. You know, so we're doing this together, and I have the full support now of my whole family, which is really, really cool. But it's because I was honest with myself, again, and I was comfortable with my decision, because the way that I knew that what I was doing was right is I checked my motives. I checked to see if this is going to hurt anybody else. I checked to see if I was being honest with myself and other people. You know, I was checking to see if this was pure, you know, and if the decisions that I'm making, again, are going to hurt myself or anybody else around me, and if this is something that I really wanted to do, because this is a lot of work. This is not easy. Do I want to put my body through this? Do I want to put my mental through this? Because getting out there on the court and getting your ass kicked is not easy. You know what I mean? And then picking back up and saying, I learned from this. This is okay.
Yeah, that's
I'm
hard.
going to do this again. So
yeah, that's hard.
I just know this is the right thing to do, and what I can give back to people through this also is there's a
look,
reason
in this feature, so we're going to have your story in here. First of all, as I said, when the first thing that I texted you when I had read your story was, I'm sorry. So I know that we're finishing on a very high note. I don't want to bring it back to a low note, but there's so many things that you said that, particularly father of a daughter that's 16, and a son, but I think you think of your daughters differently. Fathers think of their daughters differently, and the things that happened to you, it breaks my heart. So the first thing I could say is I'm so sorry that happened, and I love a hope story. It's so from low to so high. I guess could inspire anybody. I guess that at any time you could do anything. And then the main thing is, I had met both of your boys here before we started, is if you got kids, man, keep them in sports. Like, get them, I don't want to say addicted to something, but even if this is quasi-unhealthy in your passion to do this, at least you have an esteemable goal to pursue.
Right.
And you sound like you're balanced, I mean, in terms of like where your priorities, sobriety, God, all the stuff like that. I mean, but it's something that you're focused on that's esteemable, that can be like, damn, everybody's like, damn, like pro tennis player. So my hat is off to you.
Thank you.
I really, again, I'm sorry that all this happened. I'm really amazed by it. I would hope and pray overall for like an evenness. I mean, that's got to be a lot to process, getting your ass kicked by something of who you might have been, right? You could have rolled back the clock 20 years. So, anyhow, I know that you need to get on the court. I appreciate you taking and sharing as raw as you have. And we'll tell some of the other stories in the business, other stuff like that. I want to track some more things. I want to see let us know what's going on with your.
Oh my God, absolutely. Are you kidding? You'll see me on TV. You were like, oh my God.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring it in for an abrupt landing because we've been on for so long and it's so much here. This has been another pretty raw, real. Like, this is Erika Sandor-Zur. I'm going to have pictures, by the way. I'm going to find orange jumpsuits if I can, and I'm going to put your ESPN in there. Because if it's on the internet, I'm going to find it. I'm going to find it. It will be in this as well. So thanks so much. This has been another exclusive interview by Recovery Today magazine. This is Erika Sandor-Zur, and a pro tennis player, from crack addict to pro tennis player. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Hang on one second. I'm going to stop the recording.